Hello, I decided to make a video so that I could be a little bit clear on requirements for research. I am making this video for my fourth year students who are doing their final year project. Now, I know when you're an undergrad student in fourth year, you probably don't think research is very important. But for those of you who are continuing on to graduate school or probably going to be writing reports and research documents in your workplace, it's still important to understand something to do with proper research. So this video is going to deal mostly with data analysis. Now, I've looked at most of your papers, and I'm assuming at this point, if you're looking at this video, you have already written the introduction section. You have talked about your research problem, your goals, objectives, you have formulated your research questions, and all these should be related. As I say, research is a hierarchical process, so that means that the research topic leads into the statement of the problem. The statement of the problem helps you formulate your goals and objectives, which lead to your formulation of your research questions, and then that leads to maybe hypothesis. If you're trying to become a little bit more advanced and do something complicated, you can formulate a hypothesis. And methods, then you also do your literature review, but that's not what this video is about. I want to talk about the data analysis. You have completed your research and now you're about to write your findings. Now, before we go into some of the details of data analysis, you need to understand that data analysis or statistics can be categorized into broadly two different types: descriptive and inferential. Now, descriptive statistics are those that are just basic. Maybe you're doing research on a certain area in Uganda, in Kampala, so you can describe the area in terms of size, the population, the gender, the occupation, and that is interesting. I mean, it's good to know what your sample looks like. Kind of put the basic there, just kind of describing your sample and the basics of it. But to get more meaning out of your research, you need to focus more on what I call inferential statistics, or sometimes some people might even call it advanced statistics. And this might require you to be familiar with software such as SPSS or advanced Excel applications. But SPSS is something that is a little bit easier, so I would recommend you to get familiar with that. Now, okay, if you are coming into your data analysis section, it is important first to describe your sample, where was the research conducted, and to say something briefly about your sample and your study area. Provide the statistics, but don't go into the details of what your sample looked like. Especially for urban planning research, most of the time we don't want to know the details. If you're doing a biological research, medicine, they might want you to talk about those details. But we are talking about urban planning. A lot of you are writing things related to the built environment. So we're not really very interested in some of these details about the age group between 10 to 11 was 5%, between 11 to 20 was 6%, between 20 to 25. Some of you are writing all those details, and it's not necessary to do that. All those details belong to the appendix. When you come to your data analysis section, focus on putting data that answers your research question. Okay, I'll say that again. focus on data that answers your research questions. So basically, you'll ask me, what are research questions? Your research questions are those questions that you probably wrote immediately after your goals and objectives. The research questions are not what is in your questionnaire. You know, your field questionnaire when you are interviewing respondents. Those are your questionnaire or data gathering tools. The research questions are the overarching questions like guiding this research. What questions are we trying to answer? For instance, some of you are trying to answer, what are the perceptions of pedestrians towards the condition of the facilities in their towns, pedestrian facilities in their towns. So this is what I would call a research question. Okay, so focus on the research question. All right, so the data analysis section, like I said, begins with a description of your sample, brief description, maybe half a page. If you write one page, you're writing too much. Of course, depending on the research, I suppose you need to use your informed judgment. But as a general rule of thumb, don't spend too much describing your sample, you know, especially minor things like age, housing tenure, which is not even related to the central research that you're doing. Then, okay, so what should be in the data analysis section? The best way to do this is go back to your research question and look at research question 1. Maybe research question 1 says, what times do people feel safe in this urban area while walking from work to their homes? Maybe that was your research question. So look at your data and ask, which aspect of my data answers this question? Okay, and then that is what you should put for us in the data analysis. You create a chart or a table. Now, you also have to be very familiar with what is the most appropriate data visualization tool to use. Some things are better off it's better off to, you know, represent some data on charts, others are tables. Just don't put things on tables or charts without really thinking about what is the most appropriate. And then when you put the data on the chart or the table, please do not duplicate the data on a different table. Okay, so if you have a table on occupation of people who use the walking facilities mostly at 10 a.m., don't put a table for that, then put a chart for it. What is the point? Okay, so that's point number 1. Choose the most appropriate visualization of your data. Okay, well, that is point 2. Point number 1 was put data that only answers your research question. And what is data that answers the research question? It's not the descriptive data describing your population. It is the data addressing the research question directly. Okay, number 2. Do not put only one variable on the chart, which will not really give us a story. Okay, let's say you are talking about feelings of safety among the pedestrians. Okay, it's okay for them to write, you know, it's okay to put data and say, well, a lot of people say they didn't feel safe. But it's even more interesting when you cross-tabulate that data with the time they walk. Okay, because people who walk at night might say they don't feel safe. People walk in the mornings when there's light might say they feel safer. And not only is it important to know why people at night don't feel safe, you don't look at the data and just say, okay, well, you don't feel safe at night, you shouldn't be walking at night because it's dark anyway. You need to ask yourself, what is the implication of that data point, that finding for my policy? So if people who walk at night don't feel safe, that means maybe we need to have more lighting along the pedestrian facilities, walkways. Okay, so cross-tabulate employment with why I choose to walk. But don't do things like cross-tabulating, housing tenure with time of walking. That is not related to your research on pedestrian friendliness or walkability. Okay, if you're cross-tabulating anything, it should always be something, one variable should be related to walkability or factors that affect walkability. So no housing tenure with employment type or gender with time of walking. That gender with time of walking does not, well, according to my urban planning experience, I do not know that that is a very important variable to know. But if you think it is important, please tell us. Otherwise, relegate it to the appendix or don't even put it at all in your research. Okay? Then when you're doing comparisons, some of you are looking at two areas within the same city or two different cities. Don't put separate charts for each of the areas. Okay? Number one, focus on reporting aggregate data. What do I mean by aggregate data? Like, let's say if you did the research in Kisenyi and you interviewed people on 20 different roads, don't put different charts for all the 20 roads. The road for Kabaka and Jagala Road, and then you put another road for Kafumi Mukasa Road, and another chart for Kato Road. That is too unnecessary detail. Aggregate and put all the data together on one chart. Okay, if you want, during your analysis you can mention and say most people who were walking say they felt safe walking at night, but particularly we noticed this response on Kafume Mukasa Road. But don't put a separate chart for Kafume Mukasa, because that is what I would call superfluous. It's unnecessary detail. If you want, put it in the appendix, but frankly speaking, I don't think it is necessary at all to break it down into those. But do please mention in your analysis that specifically once in a while mention that this road we noticed was unique in this sense. And that's also another thing with your data analysis. Tell the audience what they cannot see obviously on the chart. Don't describe what we can already see on the chart. Tell us what is more hidden, more of interest. What is the story there in the chart that we cannot see just by looking at the chart? Okay, and then again, tell us only the most important things. You don't have to tell us the detail of 100% of the people say they walk in the morning, 20% say in the evening, like all the way to the 0%. Just tell us the key points, the ones that are interesting and stand out. Okay, and I think let me just go back to the issue of comparisons. Yes, when you're comparing two areas, like some of you are comparing two cities, compare them on one chart. Put all the data on one chart. Don't put one chart for Mbale and another one for Jinja, or one chart for Tororo and another one for Lira. Put Lira and Mbale together on the same chart, and then create a graph that shows one showing Lira and one, so that the comparisons are easier. Okay, and finally, please read the guidelines that I sent you. It is very obvious that a lot of you are not reading the guidelines I sent you. If you read those guidelines, you wouldn't be making the mistakes that you are making. Okay? In conclusion, your data analysis is number one. Know the difference between descriptive and inferential. Okay? Focus your data, number two, on answering the research questions. How do you do that? Look at your research questions and then ask yourself, in this data that I have here, which one answers these research questions, or which charts can I put? And another thing I would like to say is that don't focus on putting so many charts. Okay? Just put what is of interest and stands out. Do not duplicate data, number three. Number four, do not tell us what we can already see on the chart with our own eyes. Use inferential statistics and like cross tabulation. Maybe you can even use SPSS to do a chi-square test or whatever if you're doing comparisons, and show us what is of interest. Well, I hope that is enough. It will help you guys do your research better. If you have any questions, please send me an email to my official email. Do not send any email to my personal email. And please remember your email etiquette. Do not send emails without headers. Do not send email without telling me what version of this research you're doing and what I'm supposed to do with it. Some of you have been sending me empty emails. That is not proper. Tell me in your email which version of your research you're sending and what you expect me to do with it. Read it or submit it. Thank you.